Welcome, welcome. Listen, family, we are back, and tonight is a special night. Y'all know we already switched it up on y'all already. Instead of doing Wednesdays, we do Thursdays. But this time, we had to come and start y'all out on a positive note on a Sunday. So please make sure that y'all like, share, subscribe. But we just want to say welcome to y'all and just sit back as we kick this intro because we got a good discussion for you guys tonight.
They the rawest new podcast, who want the smoke? Coming raw and uncut like who want this dope? Whatever you want, they for sure to cover the topic. From racial issues to fashion flies to cockpit. Y'all ain't never get it like this, cause they ain't never did it like this. We on our this the way the cookie crumbles for y'all. She gon' bring the inspiration to all. You know what's up with her. And this shit manifesting is a vision. And y'all gon' love TJ cause he the realest. From the heart of them all, they the start of it all. You looking for a high learning, holla at Gerard. The professor, nothing lesson, coming at you with the lessons. Get your edge if you knowin' what's good for you. They educated, but they still keep it hood for you. Won't need another, this one here really do it for you. Baby, I'm all for you. Yeah, baby, I'm all for you. If it come down to love for you, let me show you how to love for you.
Peace, peace, peace. What's going on, virtual world? How y'all feeling? It's the Culture podcast. Myself, Furious Styles in the building. We got the Queen Luna. The Queen Luna always representing and providing that balance. But we don't do this solo. It's a team group effort. Behind the scenes, we got the OG Flex controlling the controls. But then we have our marvelous, magnificent guest this evening as we tackle the topic of domestic violence prevention, but then also breast cancer wellness. We have Miss Natasha Mosby, the LCSW, in the building. How are you this evening? Peace.
Hello. Happy Sunday.
Well, Natasha, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let our guests know who you are and what brings you here to be on the Culture Podcast tonight.
Well, my name is Natasha Mosby. I am here right now in Las Vegas. I live here with my family, so you might hear some noise out there in a second. I teach at UNLV in our School of Social Work. I'm an LCSW. I have a private practice. And I'm very passionate about wellness and mental health. And this month is a very special month for me about breast cancer awareness. I lost my mother to breast cancer, so I am constantly talking about awareness and prevention and access and all the things for women of color. So that's very close to my heart.
Wow.
We definitely appreciate you, man. And I want to say condolences to your mother. Listen, there's so much stuff that's birthed out of our moments of pain. And honestly, that's kind of where the Culture Podcast was presented anyway, is we wanted to talk about those topics in our families that are taboo. We want to talk about how different things impact, especially the Black and Brown communities. And this is one of those things that really do impact us, but we don't talk about. So when appropriate, we want to begin to open up the door to our home so that we can deal with those challenging things, because historically we've been known to honor this code and secrecy. Like if something's going on in my house, I ain't gonna say nothing. Don't nobody need to know what really happened in my family. Don't nobody need to know how I am impacted. But what we really want to do is making sure that we immobilize that and we shift the different cultures and things like that. Because right now, the greatest piece of it is even when it comes to breast cancer awareness or domestic violence, both very serious topics. If we can start to open up that door, more people will know that they're not alone. and they will begin to actually feel more supported. So let's kind of start with breast cancer. So Natasha, can you talk to us about the code of secrecy when it comes to that, and how can that be harmful in our community?
There's so many layers to that. So the code of secrecy, I will say, it, it it can be harmful, very harmful. And so when I use the word secrecy, for me, that's about, I'm going to hold a secret about my pregnancy, right? If we want to do a reveal of some sort. But when I'm talking about my health and my wellness and things that can impact me, right, in terms of overall wellness, we need to have some conversations around that. But at the same time, I'm always talking to my clients about where do we get that idea that it's not okay to share our stories, right?
Mm.
So it's deeper than that. It is giving permission as a youth, as a child in relationships. Where do we get that message that we have to be quiet and sit in this pain by ourselves? So even with me, I've been saying out loud, I give myself permission to. I give myself permission to undo those narratives that we've heard throughout our lives and just culturally. So it's so many layers, um, and there are people there that are truly in our corner that want to hear our stories and talk about what's going on and provide a safe space to do that. So there's all those pieces where individuals may not feel comfortable or safe to share what's happening with them. So we, right, have to do a better job at creating that. And this is one avenue that you guys are doing right now, creating that space. Providers are creating that space. Our girlfriend groups are creating that space. There's so many avenues to give folks permission to talk about this is what's going on with me, and this is where I'm struggling. This is where I need the most help. So that can be so healing. Yes.
Wow, wow. I'm thinking as you're talking to me as a male, when we talk about breasts, that the way we sexualize breast
Yeah.
in the West, this for me, and Luna talked about it being taboo. I can
Hmm.
just talk about from my perspective. I know family members that dealt with it, and it was one of those things just because of breasts. It's like I never even mentioned it.
Yeah, even when we talk about body parts, right? When we look at our family culture and dynamics, even things breast wasn't said they were breast, they were something else. So I was very mindful as I started having children to call it what it was. This is your breast, this is your penis, this is your vagina, and undoing
Mhm.
that shame around those body parts, they can create some body images issues, right? So undoing that. What does that say about a woman's body or even a man's body?
Mhm.
By ignoring those things, they can create shame, right, around who we are and what we have. So, yeah, there is some taboo around that.
And I think it's important as well for us to begin to acknowledge that breast cancer doesn't just impact women, it also impact men as well. And it's still that space of, like, one of the things that we want to even talk about is, when is secrecy appropriate? And even if we broaden this in general, and not just breast cancer but cancer in general, there's many people who have lost family members from that space. And the question is, when's the right time to tell someone that this is what I'm dealing with? Am I going to be a burden on this person? Is someone going to look at me differently because I'm a male and I have breast cancer? Or like, just the different things or concepts that come to our minds. So how do we kind of quiet the noise when it comes to when it is time to share? Who do we share it with? How do we know it's the most appropriate person to share with, for those people who might be dealing with this now?
I think too, what what we may be neglecting is that individual too is coping with it. So now I'm dealing with it. I'm thinking about it in my head. So now I have to talk out loud about my experience. So education is so important. If you have a spouse or a close friend, maybe that can be that first person. But that individual too need a moment to kind of wrap their mind around what they're going through and what does this mean in terms of life expectancy and treatment. So there's so many things they need answers to probably before sharing. I can, with my mom, I was the first to know, right? And it was kind of oh, by the way, right? By the
Wow.
way, I went to the doctor and this is happening. So I remember just stopping. And I was like, Mama, this is kind of serious. Can I go to the doctor with you? Right. At first she was like, no, because still I'm her daughter. That's my mother. And I said, Mama, please give me permission. I want to learn more about this too. Right. So it was really about me just stepping in. I was like, I'm going to be involved in this process with my mom, and being able to be very objective and be mindful of my emotions as I was helping my mom through the process. That's important too. So there's so many layers to when to share, when not to share, and who to share it with. but I would say folks that you feel closest and safest with.
Hmm. Wow. What about places of employment and stuff like that? Do they? I mean, do you share that? Do you recommend them sharing it with your like first line leaders and co-workers?
Absolutely. I mean, you definitely need to go to HR. You're right, because you're talking about possible medical treatment, FMLA. So being able to sit down and sort all that out, like, what does this mean? I do this with clients in sessions, to be honest. Sometimes I've been kind of on, I think I've had more clients tell me first they've been diagnosed with some sort of chronic illness before they told their family members, right? A lot of that too for them is the process, though these same questions we're asking. When do I tell? What do I do about my job? What about my children? Right now, I'm just say I did tell her I was going to do this podcast, and my youngest client, she is 35 years old, and she's in stage 4 of breast cancer. She has little children. So that's been emotional for me, and I was the first to get this information. And so walking her through it, walking her through the paperwork for her employer, and even holding space for her while we talked about what is that going to look like, telling her children and her spouse. So there's all these different things that the individual themselves are going through in terms of processing this news. So having someone with them as they're doing this is important, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a friend, someone that can be as non-judgmental and try not to personalize. Or why didn't you tell me first? Let's not do that, right?
Right.
Let's
Right.
truly be objective, sit, hold space, and say, how can I support you? This isn't about me. It wasn't about me. It was about me supporting my mom, right? And then I found my safe space to talk to someone like, oh my God, my mother has cancer. And I had my breakdown moments. But it's so important. You have to find that safe space to do that.
Yeah.
Natasha, I think you bring up a good point in just that safe place. And me being a therapist as well, they do share with us things freely first. And what I will also caveat is for the family, like sometimes it's not the helping professional's role to be the one to spill the beans either, because we have to, hold confidentiality. And sometimes the first person the family want to go to for answers is the doctor, is the therapist, is the why you didn't tell me, I'm the one that brought them here, things like that. And we have to respect everybody's journey and their process system. Like for me personally, I remember when my great grandmother passed away about, let's say, almost 10 years ago now. She had cancer, but I didn't know about it because I was doing my process for the sorority that I'm a part of. So they didn't tell me until after my process was over and my grandmother was already on hospice by that time. And it was like, well, if we would have told you, then you would have, we would have messed up what you were going through. So like sometimes people may not tell you because they're trying to make sure that you're good, towards the end. So what I would tell any family member out there, everybody may not know at the same time, and it doesn't make you less important than the other people. It's going to take a journey. It's going to take a process. And just like Natasha said, as you're navigating those spaces, it's okay for family members to get help. Don't feel guilty for those family members that's going through their own journey and process. Like you need a safe place to vent, a safe place to be able to share what your thoughts are. And I'm looking here now, somebody asked, why do people keep it a secret? So I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, Natasha, but can you kind of share with this person, why do you think now people keep this stuff as a secret?
There's so many variables to that, though. I mean, for one person, it could be I don't want the poor me syndrome, right? I don't want the you know the sympathy per se. For some, that's that. For others, I'm dealing with it myself. Give me a moment to process it in my head before I start talking out loud about what it is. Somebody can be denial, right? I've had family members that's been in denial about their illness. I don't think it's a matter of them being ignorant. It's a matter of this is tough. So now if I'm sharing this with my loved ones, my children, and I don't know, seeing it from this side as a therapist, watching this young mom come to terms with she would not celebrate her baby's 8th birthday, that's tough. So she's trying to wrap her mind around that. It's so many variables. And keep in mind, our health is supposed to be, we see that as confidential, right? This is my health. This is my health. And I get that. But we have to make sure if we have those folks around us that we feel safe to talk about our health journey with, we can. But traditionally, we haven't done that. There's not a lot of people that do these things like I deal with it. And that's great. And I would have those conversations with my mom. I said, Mom, you are the strongest woman I know. But can I help you with this? So I
Wow.
acknowledge, yes, you are strong, mommy. You taught me how to be strong, and I guarantee you, I'm gonna sit in this with you, and we'll be strong together. So I think by me saying it gave her permission to say, well, I have an appointment next week, and I was like, okay, I'll meet you there, right? And some of that was burden. My mother's a strong Black woman from Mississippi, right? She did not want to burden her children with this information, and so giving her permission to say, Mama, I thought it was an honor to be there with her. It was an
Yeah.
honor to be by my mom's side before she passed. That was an honor for me. So we have to be careful with our words too around family because they hear us. So if you're judgmental and gossiping in your family, chances are they're not going to tell you much,
Right.
right? So we have to be mindful how we put that energy around there to give people permission to come and talk to us too.
That's a good point. So sometimes that precedent is set well before the
Yep.
illness even comes. But I'm thinking about this whole awareness, process, and like who or where can we push more resources or help? And I'm thinking how much the health professionals, how much they have to take on. Because I mean, you go there first, and when you find out, and I mean, immediately I can just imagine your mind is all over the place. Like, who do I call? What can I do? How long will it take? What's the life expectancy? And I'm just thinking, like, if you're there at a doctor's appointment and you got scheduled for 30, 45 minutes to an hour, I can imagine that you leave there with probably with more questions, than answers.
Yes. Um, for me, I agree with Luna when she said this is confidential in terms of when they see us as a provider. But when
Mhm,
I meet with my clients, I do encourage them to
mhm.
find a person to go to the doctors with them because there's going to be questions that you think of. Your mind is everywhere. Even keeping a journal, right? I kept a journal with for my mom, and I would sit on the side and I would write down things so we can talk about it later. I had questions, and before we went, I said, "Mom, is it okay if I ask these questions?" Right? So getting her permission, because guess what? She's still my mama, right? I was an adult at the time, but I respected her autonomy in that. So keeping a journal, questions for the doctor, having someone to go and support you, because that's a lot of information that you're taking in about your medical care. And I can just say on the other end of that, I'm so pro integrated healthcare. So having mental health providers inside of these places, these
Yeah.
doctors' offices, have really helped with managing chronic illnesses and also help with mental health illnesses, right? Mental health diagnosis. So I'm like pushing. We have to get more mental health providers inside of these doctors' offices so we can share in that terms of how you treat the patient from a medical perspective to also a mental health perspective. Because
Yeah.
with the diagnoses also come anxiety, depression, all
Right.
those things, affects them psychologically.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I was looking at this comment, and there's a couple of ones that have it. So I want to acknowledge this Facebook user. I'm sorry we don't see your name, but we definitely, give you our condolences. And she was sharing how her late husband passed away about 10 years ago. But there's a second comment that she put, and something that she said really stood out to me. She said, "So words matter, and some people just don't know what to say." Recently I've really been going with the whole, they say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is a lie from the pits of
That is a
hell.
lie.
Words do hurt.
Yes,
And
they do.
sometimes what I do tell the families of people with chronic illnesses is if you don't know what to say, that person will respect you way more if you say, I don't know what to say, than to say something and it further hurts that person. So for those individuals, sometimes it is good to have someone that's willing to be like a family intervention specialist. Like for me, oh hey girl, for me, sorry, the person it was, I do like family intervention sessions where I try to be specialized, where I'm not necessarily there as a therapist, but I'm there as, okay, let's all of us come to the table and let the people without the person with the diagnosis really share how they feel. And then we
Mm.
process how you feel. And then I'm able to give it to you in a way where when you share it with that person, if it even is a good space to share with that person, is done in a piece where it's protective, and now it comes off loving and things like that. So sometimes what I will say, if you don't know what to say, practice it with someone else that might be in that space. And again, it goes back to, don't be the gossiper. Don't tell the family member don't know. But if you know that certain people know, y'all come together and really have a conversation, because that other person is going through different challenges. And even you as the family member, you may feel depression, you may feel different mental health challenges and anxiety because you don't know what's going to happen next, but find that person you can trust that's not the necessarily person who's dealing with it, but like that therapist, like maybe the doctor that you can trust, and ask those questions to the professional, because sometimes asking the question to the person who's dealing with it makes them even more overwhelmed, because it's making them think about that thing that they're,
Yeah.
that they're dealing with. So these types of conversations are important because it's bigger than just someone sharing their diagnosis. But it's like, okay, once they share, now what? What does that mean for them? What does it mean for you, who is the person who is, going to survive, beyond them, and just all those different questions that come up. So one thing that we were talking about here, and I'm gonna pass this to Furious. I know you guys had a mental wellness conference, so
Yeah,
go ahead.
excellent conversation, by the way. And even after the fact, I would love to share just kind of a personal, point. But one of the topics was around environmental wellness. What role can that play when it comes to breast cancer prevention and treatment?
So, environmental wellness, absolutely, that was one of our breakout sections in our men's health conference, but more about our access to, right? So, this is about access, about clean water, in our environment where we work, play, live, play a role in our overall health and wellness. Do we live in spaces that provide greenery, that we can go outside and feel safe to be outside? Are we breathing in clean air? Do we have access to clean water and food? Do we have access to spaces within our community that sell fresh vegetables and things like that? I talk a lot in our social work department in classes about, deserts when it comes to, food deserts, right?
Right.
So I don't have access to clean air, clean water, food that is nutritional for my body. It will absolutely play a part in our health and also just our stress, right? So when we're stressed, a lot of stress affects our immune system. If our immune system is compromised, guess what else is being compromised? Our ability to fight disease. If I don't have access to, clean air, clean water, clean food, things are nutrition for me, it affects my immune system. So all those things, I'm no doctor, I'm no medical doctor, but for me, I will say when my mother passed away 12 years ago. I did so much reaching in, digging out, finding out for myself, what do I need to do to keep myself safe, right? And about prevention. So checkups. So one thing I will say, we've been taught, and this was critical for me, that at 50, right, you should start getting your mammograms. That's not true. My mother died by 51.
Wow.
So my mother, what I've learned, I had an amazing doctor that worked on my mom's team, and he looked at me and said, Natasha, I need you to do research around African American women and breast cancer. And I was like, okay. So I'm just digging in, pulling all these things, and what I've learned is that although we are less likely to get breast cancer, like women are above us, we're more likely to die from it.
Wow.
Right? We're more likely to have aggressive breast cancer, and by the age of 50, we're probably in stage 4. So when I'm reading this and I'm just like holding on to my chest, and I'll be 45 next month. The first time I had a mammogram, I was in my early 40s. And I remember asking the doctor, I said, can you schedule me for a mammogram? And this particular doctor, I won't say any names, he goes, oh, you're too young. I says, okay, well, my mother passed away of breast cancer and I want to have a mammogram. He dismissed me again. So I turned to him, I said, well, if you're saying I don't need one, can you write that in my medical chart? Can you write, I am denying this patient a mammogram, although she has disclosed to me that her mother was diagnosed by 47 and was deceased by 51. He turned to me and he says, okay, I get you. Right. So being aware of our rights, being aware of your family history, knowing, in terms of prevalence, knowing how environment affects us, that's so important with prevention and checkups. Just because you get a checkup, I know it's scary. I was scared out of my mind. Every year I go in for my mammogram, but I pray, I do a little meditation. I said, if I can have some early prevention is key. So I talk a lot to women I see, and even men, about prevention and getting checkups. It's important. Wow. I know that was a lot, but
a lot of necessary. And I'm thinking, as you were talking about that doctor and how you had to push back on them, I'm thinking about some people who I don't know if brave is the word to say, or more inept to push back, and how they would, that could have been the last word. And they didn't say anything else about it. because they're taking you're trusting your medical provider, and if they're telling you, you don't need one, but you're knowing. I mean, I'm just thinking like how that had to make you feel for him to tell you that you're too young and try to discourage you from getting one.
And I said that to him too. We had some, he's not my doctor anymore, but I had some conversations with him around supporting his patients. Right?
Yeah,
I said, I don't care if she's 16. If she says write me an order to get this test done, do it. And I think we've been so trained that the doctors know it all. And I'm not taking away from doctors, but at the same time, I know my body. My mother found her own lump. A doctor didn't find it. My mother found her lump. Just from doing her own, research. And she went to the doctor and told them I need to have a mammogram. They told her in a couple of months. I mean, she ended up getting it, but she found her lump herself. So, my mother lived 2 years past what they expected her to live. So I'm, gratitude and grace for that. But I watched my mom be very passionate and advocate about her health and what she needed. So that aids me in what I'm doing. But I can only imagine how many women are sitting in spaces with doctors and not being heard about their medical care. So now we're talking about health disparities. So it's not just about educating us, it's also educating the systems that play a part in taking care of us too.
Peace. Well, I can't make one of the caveat, in sharing and seeing what all connects us. My aunt passed away about 2 years ago. And kind of with everything that was shared as far as like communicating and finding out the news and how it affects. My aunt's diagnosis and transition happened within a month. I mean, it was quick. And my mother was kind of the person that was transferring her back and forth to the hospital. So getting the information. And she recalls a story of when the doctors told my aunt that it was cancer, kind of the sob, like she could hear the sob, kind of that hopelessness or helplessness that is like, yo, this is the end. And my mother said that was one of the hardest times because she knew it was like the cry of like a new revelation. But then even the quickness and like I said, just being there, the day that my aunt passed, she was supposed to have had a doctor's appointment that morning. And then it got pushed back either like to the afternoon or the next day. And literally within like 2 hours of the doctor's appointment being pushed back, she had transitioned. So, it's just quick the way it happens. And then kind of the mental health piece. My aunt, when I say she was an OG, like she didn't tell anybody. And kind of how it happened is she almost had like a bucket list of her own that she just started to check off. So she purchased my grandmother a new washing machine. She got her car that hadn't worked in years finally towed out of the driveway. My rolling paper brand, she purchased a box of rolling papers before she passed and made sure she signed a little note. Left shoes, like we're still finding brand new pairs of shoes. So it's very weird because to us, we were hurt. But it's like my aunt, when she figured it out, though she felt it and experienced it, it's like she made peace with it and wanted to let us know that it was all good, whether it worked or not. But it's kind of the way she went out, she kind of was at peace with it and decided I'm going to go on my own terms. So.
Wow. Powerful story, man. Wow.
And I definitely, would say to any person, respect the individual who's going through it. Absolutely. Sometimes we may be grieving it harder than that person might be grieving it. So we want to respect their own journey. We want to respect their own process. And as we were talking about the ugly head of when it comes to breast cancer, we can argue that domestic violence is another piece that can be ugly as well. So just so that we can make sure we get both topics in, I want to at least sincerely give my condolences for anyone who have survived a family member passing away from cancer, specifically breast cancer. And with this being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, let's just not talk about the diagnosis itself, but talk about the impact that it has on those who are diagnosed and the families and friends of those who are diagnosed. So the Culture Podcast sincerely give you guys our condolences. And let's get into this thing about domestic violence, y'all. It's also called intimate partner violence, and it occurs between people in an intimate relationship. Domestic violence can literally take many forms, including emotional, sexual, and physical abuse and threats of abuse. And abuse by a partner can happen to anyone, but domestic violence is most often directed towards women. And when we are talking about this, is really about everybody who is impacted by this form of violence. So we got a short video that we're going to jump this discussion off of. Again, we just want to say, if anything we show is sensitive, we want to tell you guys the reason why we're talking about these things is to lessen the likelihood of it happening. So if anyone's triggered by anything that we talk about in this second part, or even from the first part, we apologize in advance, but the only way we can give you a voice is if we shed light to it. So go ahead and play that video, Flex.
Women in color are killed at a disproportionate rate than any other race.
The statistics are hard to swallow. Listen to this. According to the CDC, African American women are 3 times more likely than white women to experience death as a result of domestic violence. 22% of domestic violence events ending in homicide are of African American women. The CDC also says domestic violence is one of the leading causes of death for Black women ages 15 to 35.
The economic disparities, the ongoing discrimination, they're less likely to have the better jobs and economically don't do as well. Maybe they're dependent on their abuser more so than other races.
Other reasons for the epidemic, according to experts with the Samaritan House, include fear of isolation, not knowing how to navigate the legal system, fear of arrest, and even skepticism of intervention and shelter services. But some of the reasons go back deeper.
Because of the marginalization of Black and African American women here in the United States, due to historical discrimination, due to economic hardship, as well as social injustice, reaching out for support and assistance to law enforcement has historically been something that has been very difficult.
Man. I don't even know where to start because I got many emotions. You know, one thing about this podcast that I love is that we can be human. And I didn't even put 2 and 2 together until this moment. So believe it or not, the day that everybody else was mourning the death of Kobe Bryant, I was mourning the death of a friend that was murdered that morning by her ex-husband. She had finally got away, so we thought. And it was a thing where she wasn't his first victim, nor was she his last. And as I'm sitting here and I'm processing my feelings and my emotions just personally, I will tell people, you know, as a clinician, I actually just kind of staffed a case with someone I supervise, and they were asking, like, you know, what's the steps for domestic violence? And I said, well, there is a safety risk, but there is no legal steps when it comes to people with domestic violence. Like if someone's suicidal, having homicidal ideations, if there's infant loss, or if there's child abuse and neglect, if there's elder abuse and neglect, we have people that we can call, or we're supposed to call, or we lose our license to say this person is in danger. But when it comes to domestic violence, it's really based on that person. And just like that video talked about, there's so many different reasons why men and women of domestic violence, they don't go and get the support or help that they need, because there is no proper chain of command. It really just depends on where you go. So I'm definitely looking forward to just hearing Natasha's kind of feedback on how can we, as people who are in the helping profession, better help those individuals who have been victims of domestic violence with the different limitations that we have legally for that population.
Oh, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This has been such a touchy subject and for me when it comes to my clients, because even I've had 2 that I'm reflecting on now, doing all the things that we talked about in therapy. One, still the outcome's not favorable for her. in the other, right, she went to a shelter, and that situation wasn't stable for her as well. So going through, call the police, get the restraining order, all those things, I find that one, for me, making myself available as much as possible. I've had clients call me late at night, where I will connect them as soon as possible to resources. But now we're talking in terms of resources, and are there beds available for women and men? Because guess what? I've also had men that were victims of domestic violence. So I don't want to discriminate in that area. Where what are the resources? Where can they go? What's the age requirement for their children? Not know if you know this, but some shelter will not take boys over the age of 12. So if I'm a woman and I'm in a domestic issue and my child is 13, 14, where does my son go? So do I stay here and just try to, placate things and make sure that our children are safe? So there's all of those variables. So I try my hardest to provide as many resources as possible. Also, I do ask clients in therapy, is there any family member that you trust, going back to social support, which is so huge, that you trust, that can be on this list that I can call to check on your well-being in terms of release of information? I found that sometimes it's no, because even with domestic violence situation, these families have become isolated. There's been a lot of shaming. There's been a lot of, well, that's what he or she get. And I'm like, they don't need that right now. What they need is support. So there's really been a scratching the surface, going through there and say, who can we call? Who can we put on this list to be a resource to you and your children? So it's every day. I will say every day is finding out what can we do differently, and getting police to believe women. I'm going to say this, getting folks to believe women. And I've worked with women that their spouses were the police of the domestic, right? So they're, where do they go for safety? It's a challenge, but I'm hopeful, and I try my best to provide as much as I can for them.
Man, this comment right here is the thing that breaks my heart. I really thought I was prepared, y'all. I'm all emotional. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that out there. But honestly, this is the truth. There really is no concrete steps, and I know some amazing organizations. The Samaritan House is right here in Hampton Roads, Virginia, where we are from. You also have the Grow Foundation, that is amazing. But again, those resources are very limited because you have so many people that deal with this type of violence. And like you said, depending on when you call, if there's no concrete evidence, and even if it is, it's like a civil matter. It's not, that person's not protected. So I would even say, if there's anybody who's listening to this, and even for myself, the same way we have strict rules and guidelines for people who are suicidal, homicidal, child abuse and neglect, elder abuse and neglect, I believe we truly do need strict guidelines for this population as well, to help people stay safe. Because again, if your basic needs aren't met, right? So it goes back to Maslow hierarchy of needs. I'm gonna put my little nerd head on. You cannot read self-actualization if your basic needs aren't met, if you don't have safety and security. Domestic violence breaches two things. Their basic needs may be met, so food, water, shelter. You got money coming in, but I don't feel safe, and I'm definitely not secure. And then in those relationships, what ends up happening is those people become very isolated. So now the people that I once actually depended on, I can't depend on that person anymore. Or you may have a person who you're dating, someone of influence, kind of like Natasha said, if that person, the police officer, if that person is the mayor or whatever, how do you go and tell that person that they're abusing me without getting in further, abuse? And then again, it's like, okay, well, what happens to the kid? We talk about child abuse and neglect, but domestic violence can easily lead to child abuse and neglect. But then if you hear domestic violence, they shoot out the other sides that happens. So I just think as a society and as a whole, we need to take this even more seriously, because people are losing their lives. Like I said, I've lost many friends, sadly, because of this, scenario or situation. Or we get the phone calls. We've had many calls in the middle of the night, having to go in and take care of people who were dealing with just different issues. So I would say this, Furious, how do you feel when situations like this kind of hit our doorstep?
It's rough. And I could kind of take it, especially as we're talking to men. Our fellas, one of the first things, even I had to, fortunately, I've never been involved in a domestic violence situation, but I have had moments where I've had to recognize emotions and see where these could potentially be leading to. And what I mean by that, us men have a way of feeling we possess,
Yeah.
own, or control our significant others. And when you get to that point, it's a downward spiral because you're only in control of your own life. You're only in control of you. So when you have this feeling of possession or ownership, you're projecting, you're putting like a fear. So as we know, where there's love, there's no fear, and vice versa. Where there's fear, there's no love. Like that person is with you out of fear, it's not love. So
Yeah.
you're going to see the isolation, you're going to see the depression because they're not there because they want to be. They're in a state of basically servitude. And again, no one around them believes them that you're putting out that type of energy. And it is so easy to fall into. A dear friend of mine lost her daughter. Her daughter was like 9 months old, because of the spouse and the uncontrolled anger that he exuded and wound up going on news. And it's very deep. So it's very unfortunate because it can be avoided. But the saddest part is a lot of it, not saying they don't have any control over, but they've been programmed to think in a way, programmed from their youth. They've probably seen their parents, their mothers, their aunts, their sisters, their aunts abused in a way. And one thing that I've learned, kids, they pick up by what you do, not what you say. So as much frustration as anger as you could be exuding, they're not catching the frustration and anger. They're saying, hey, this is what you do when you feel this
Yeah.
situation. So if I see my daddy, whatever he feels, if I see him responding that way, that must be the right thing to do. So 20 years later, we see a trigger coming out of something that he saw his father do, not realizing how detrimental that thing was. So
Yeah. That's good. I was just sitting there thinking about what you said, the possession part, and how it's in our music. I think about some of these lyrics with these great instrumentals behind them or beats behind them. I can't live without you, and you're my breath, and all that. And it sounds good, but I've listened to someone talk about their spouse, talk to them that way, and it began to actually be how that person responded to him. It was possession. You're mine and I'm yours, and you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. And it escalated and it began to, turn physical at some point. And to Furious point, you get people around, they minimize it and they enable that behavior. Oh, he or she really cares about you. Oh, just talk about it. And just think that we're grossly, we don't have the ability to deal with it because for one, we don't recognize what truly some of this abuse looks like to where we do minimize it.
And can I say this? We're talking about adults, but I'm seeing younger children up into age 12 having some domestic issues or intimate partner violence in high school, elementary school. So we need to be having these conversations around relationships, safety relationships. What does that look like? Talking to our young girls and boys about relationship and undo this narrative. I remember my mother said to me, she goes, a boy doesn't hit you because he like you. It's like, oh, he's doing it because he like you. No, let's not even start putting that those people, right? He hits you because that's not okay. So we have to be mindful about how we're even expressing what is like, what is love, what does that look like? And I'm seeing that with young kids in my office. They think it's cute, right? And I'm like, oh, let's have some conversations about relationships, right?
Yeah.
So I saw a good one there too that said about the non-physical abuse, the emotional and the mental abuse aspect goes unnoticed. I think someone just put that up there. It is so true.
Yeah, it starts there a lot of time, right? With mental and
it definitely does. And I think sometimes, again, it goes back to we got to stop ignoring stuff and normalizing things that's not normal. And even when you just take out the domestic part, the physical side of it, but when you talk about the emotional and mental abuse, there's so many people that when their kids get old enough and they get into empty nest syndrome, then they end up getting a divorce because it's been so many years of this type of abuse or this type of action or this type of thing. And I don't think people really understand how much of a domino effect it has when we ignore some of these things. It's like, oh, they're always been that way, or they always say that, or it becomes like real minimum. But then it goes back again to that possession, and you don't possess anyone at all. So when we're talking about domestic violence, I want for people to understand that violence can be done when you inflict any type of pain on a person, and it doesn't have to be a physical pain. It can be the words that you say, it can be the actions that you take, it can be the if you ignore your significant other for days at a time because they did something that you didn't like. That's a foundation to go to something that can be even more detrimental and more worse. So I know that we started a little late, y'all, but I want to make sure that we stay on time. And number one thing that we really been talking about today is, again, we talked about breast cancer awareness, and the greatest piece of it is education, allowing for the person who is diagnosed to have their own journey. For those of you who are supporting that person that is diagnosed, get your own safe space, because you don't want to force that person. That person's not grieving. It may not be them ignoring it. They may came to peace with whatever's happening, you know? And then we also really just talked about the aftermath and being able to be okay with going back and looking at the different signs that they've shared, but do it in a way that can be celebratory and not something that, you know, brings you down. And then with domestic violence, is us always, you know, just making sure, number one, you can definitely text and call for help. Thank you, Flex, for putting that number up there. You can text START to 88788 to get you some support and help, but also understanding that domestic violence don't just come out of nowhere. We act as if that's what happens, but there's many signs that leads up to that. It can be from a way a person talks to a way they may punish you if you do something that they don't like. So whether that is, you know, keeping you on unread for days at a time, like that's real. And again, it is starting as young kiddos that will come to a guidance counselor or therapist and say, my boyfriend either hit me, or my boyfriend said I can't get this if you don't do this, or their 7th grade teacher. So I know we talked about a lot tonight. Natasha.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah,
too?
go ahead.
Breast cancer does not mean end of life, right?
Yes.
I know we talked about end of life cases, but there's also hope. I've known individuals that's lived years past their diagnosis. I have one, she's a survivor. So all you survivors that are pushing through, educating, a good client of mine, 22 years, she has been in remission. So I want to say that too, that it doesn't mean it's the end of life. So as you're working with your families and your loved ones, be optimistic, right? To the day my mother took her last breath, I said, we're going to be positive about this thing. So have hope, because they're looking at you, and energy is real. I will say that. So don't go in thinking, oh my God, you have cancer, you're about to die. I know we go there, but I just want to put that out there. That's what I want to say.
Oh, I definitely appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we are going to prepare to leave with what we're thinking, our last token. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and cut this to a commercial break, and we'll come back and allow for everybody to give a token of what we're taking away tonight. Enterprises LLC, the home of Malara Green, your confidence coach. Malara Green is a licensed clinical social worker who serves as a psychotherapist, Reiki master, and transformative speaker. She is striving to provide the world with preventative services to lower the number of individuals in mental health facilities while helping people grow from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Malara is ready to help the humans of the world find their best selves. Please be sure to check out www.malaratransforms.com, because Malara is ready to transform with you. All right. So again, M Green Enterprises, we are here. If you need someone to walk you through either of these topics in a unique way that's created just for you and your family, that is what I am here to do. I don't just work in the Hampton Roads area. Computers has made it easy to connect with people all over the world, but sincerely, we want to make sure that you have a transformative life. That means I'm forever evolving, forever becoming better, regardless of what we are experiencing.
Peace. Thank you, Lyra, aka Luna. So this is where we at, y'all. We want to go around and just share some concluding final thoughts, just things that we picked up or things that you want to leave with TV World, Virtual World. And I just would love to start. It's a biblical passage. It's something I've been saying to my wife a few times. Finally, brethren, those things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue, there be any praise, think, meditate, dwell, ponder on those things. The mind has a way of healing. The mind has a way of readjusting and putting yourself in a better position where you think on positive things. It's just like Natasha said at the end, that energy is real. People can tell if you come in there with a right mindset, you can literally change the trajectory of someone's day. People have had moments of being healed by simply thinking the right way, or someone has came in and shifted someone's train of thought that they were finally okay by simply changing how they thought. So, whether that's dealing with a terminal illness, or if I have a young man that's on the cusp or verge of trying to change his ways, go ahead and change them. Realize this for the better. Change the people around your life for the better, for the good. Be someone that you can look toward for protection, and people aren't always trying to run from you. So, just be of love, be of positive, share, communicate, be open, realize there is hope. There is hope, and keep that positive mindset. So, yeah.
Flex, what's your parting words, King?
Yeah, just real quick. This is Christian Apologist I listen to a lot, and he talked about love being the supreme ethic that that binds us all here. And speaking of the Bible, like Fury said, in First Corinthians, it talked about that love is kind. It's that first descriptor that is kind. And what a lot of people are calling love, I'm not going to say that it's not love, but it's a perversion of it, or it's not the proper way to love and or to express whatever you're feeling, because of the love you have for someone. So a lot of times we get in these situations where we have some moments of bliss, and it's like, man, that's what keeps us going and keeps us tired, because it was fun, it's familiar, it's comfortable. We don't want to start over. We put so much work in a relationship, and we don't want to start over. But I'm telling you, if love is an act, I believe that hate is an act too. So if they love you, they also hate you. And I'm telling you, for the sake of your life, and sometimes your siblings and your other family and your kids, man, you got to get out. And it's not easy. I don't want to act like it's easy just to leave sometimes, but connect with the right resources. And if you got to leave and late at night when he or she is asleep, man, get out. And it can literally be the difference between life and death. So those are my words.
Thank you. And Natasha, our amazing guest, what will be your parting words, Queen?
I will say, when we get to share our stories, we heal ourselves in a sense, but we also give folks permission to come forward and share their stories. I believe in community healing. So I love that we can start creating more spaces for that, for these type of conversations, and someone else would pipe up and say, oh my goodness, that's been my experience. I have a young kiddo in therapy the other day said to his mom, because she feels guilty for having them at a shelter. He said, Mama, I'm sleeping in a room with 20 strangers. I feel safer there than I did at home.
Wow.
So when this little boy is 12 years old, he said this to his mom in therapy, and she looked at him. So her hearing that gave her permission to say, I did the right thing. And I'm not putting the ownership on this baby, but what I'm saying is sometimes women stay because they think it's for the best of their children. Yeah. I cannot tell you how many kids have said to me, I wish my mama or daddy would have left.
Yeah.
Right. So I know it's tough. I'm not going to say it's easy. I would never say that. Continue to reach out, continue to talk to folks, and family, don't shut them out. And I know sometimes family members get burnt out. Be there. This is difficult, and I get it. But be there, show up in love, and show up in kindness, genuine. I'm going to say that. Be genuine in how you show up for folks.
Yeah.
So that's my part.
Man, well, tonight was so special because I've been impacted by both. The very first person that ever passed away, from my knowledge, when it came to breast cancer, was one of my mentors. Her name was Candace, and everybody new Mrs. Candace here in the Hampton Roads area too. So I definitely want to make sure I put her name out there because she was the epitome of I don't care what I was diagnosed with, honey. I'm gonna praise the Lord to the end. And I just appreciated that from her. And even in her hard moments, she still mentored us and showed up. And to those individuals who are survivors of domestic violence, we commend you. I don't know how difficult it is to get out of your situation, but I'm grateful for your life. We're grateful for your life. And us here at the Culture Podcast, if you guys don't get anything else, if there's a topic that you want to talk about that's near and dear to your heart, reach out to us. Please reach out to us. So please make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your baby daddy, his family, tell everybody about the Culture Podcast because we want to heal at least one family every time we come up here. We at least just touch one person for them to know that we hear their heart and we appreciate them. Then that's what we have going on. As far as big upcoming shows and things like that, listen, we are going to be going on every other Thursday. So this one will serve for the one that we have. So you'll see us not this week, but the week after. And then also in the Hampton Roads area, I did not share this flyer with you, Flex. So I promise you're not missing anything. But on Sunday at the skating ring in Hampton at 5 o'clock, we are doing a free skate or treat. So Embry Enterprise is going to be there as a vendor to make sure that our community is able to have mental health support and services right there on site. And the first 125 skaters, again, that's the first 125 skaters, you get in for free to skate. There's going to be free food that's sponsored by AT&T. So I'm just really excited to be able to be one of the showcase that's going to be there because this is how we lower the rate of domestic violence is when we begin to bring families amongst each other so people can begin to share and people can see what healthy relationships look like and healthy interactions look like. So for me, if that's what we can do, that's what we're going to be doing on this upcoming Sunday. And I hope to see some of you guys there. And this was an amazing show, y'all. And again, thank you, Natasha, just so much for your knowledge, so much for your heart. And you are welcome to the Culture Podcast at any time, Queen. We appreciate you.
I love
Let's
you.
get that out.
Thank you.
Now it's my turn to tell y'all about my big bro Gerard and the podcast crew. From TJ the realist, Miss Cookie the professor, and you can't forget about the inspiration shit. They talk about it all, got advice for us all. You'll never know how deep the talks will go. On the weekdays, the weekends, they be going live with the topics. Then they do the segment where the floor is yours. You can post your comments, you can post your statements, yeah. You can ask your questions, They can help you get your life moving in the right direction. If you need advice on marriage, advice on finance, advice on healing, advice on credit, this the podcast that you need to check out. Go ahead and tune in, you'll feel what I'm talking about. Baby, I'ma get up for this, yeah, baby, I'm in for this, if it come down to love for this, let me show you how I love for this,
The floor is yours, y'all. If y'all want to be on the Culture Podcast, just send us an inbox. And thank y'all so much for joining in. Peace and blessings. Y'all take care.
Peace.